Great. Well, I'll kick us off and um, one moment here. So, good morning. Welcome everyone. It's October 15th, 2025. I am Paul Savas, County Commissioner, co-chair of the Metro uh, uh, C4 Metro Subcommittee. And Mayor Buck, you want to introduce yourself, please?
Thanks, Commissioner. Hi, everyone. Mayor Joe Buck from Lake Oswego, the other co-chair.
Okay. Next on my screen, Pamela.
Good morning, Pam Burback from Boring, which has not been so boring lately. And I'm back from vacation.
Thank you. Commissioner Helm.
I can't see my bottom screen here. Is my sound on?
Yes.
Okay. Diana Helm, Clackamas County Commissioner.
Okay. Mayor Milch.
Michael Milch, Mayor of Gladstone.
Okay. Commissioner Mitchell.
Mike Mitchell, Oregon City Commissioner.
My good friend Dwight Brashear.
Well, good morning, everyone. Dwight Brashear. I'm the Transit Director for the City of Wilsonville.
Great. And Oak Grove native Josh Callahan.
Morning, Commissioner Josh Callahan, City of Happy Valley City Council.
Okay. Jamie, I will turn it over to you to introduce yourself and our guest.
Thank you so much, Jamie Lorenzini, C4 staff. Before I introduce our first guest, I may turn to Mayor Buck to see if there are any updates on the upcoming impact agenda.
Thanks, Jamie. Yes. So at our next MPAC meeting, the agenda hasn't been posted, but what we're supposed to be talking about are some Metro housekeeping code amendments. Metro is also going to be giving MPAC an update on the future vision work that they're undertaking, the 2040 update on the 2040 grants. And then we get to see a presentation on Happy Valley's downtown development, which is very exciting. But the main item we're talking about is the regional housing coordination strategy, and that is what Laura is here this morning to talk to us about as well. So we'll turn it over to you, Laura. Good morning. Thanks for being here.
Good morning. Thank you all for having us back. I will get the presentation up real quick and then we'll get into it. All right. So yes, as Mayor Buck mentioned, we will be bringing this update back to MPAC next week, but you all will get a little bit of a preview of what we'll be sharing. This is our last update on the progress of the development of the Regional Housing Coordination Strategy. We're wrapping up with the public comment period. The last day of that is today. So if you visit the project page at the website at the bottom of this slide, you'll be able to participate in a survey if you haven't already. Otherwise, we'd love to hear your feedback at this meeting. All right. So just a reminder where this project is coming from. So the Regional Housing Coordination Strategy is Metro's required response to the state of Oregon's housing needs analysis framework. So you all may be familiar that many local jurisdictions are required to produce housing production strategies. Those are required for any city over 10,000 people. Metro, as the regional government, has a bit of a different requirement to produce the housing coordination strategy with many of the same goals to promote housing production, to promote housing affordability and choice. But primarily, we're looking for strategies and actions that Metro can take that make sense to fill regional gaps, whether that's resources, capacities, or tools. So that was our directive for this project and where we were headed over the last year or so as we were developing it. So now we're at the final stage. We're heading towards adoption. So we're in the process of sharing out our draft strategy with all of our engaged participants and seeking one last kind of round of feedback on how it's landing, how it makes sense for you all before we head towards council adoption by the end of this year. So a little reminder of kind of where all of these ideas for actions came from. We did a pretty extensive a round of engagement through the course of the year, working with our jurisdictional partners, working with advocacy groups, service providers, housing developers, to really understand the barriers and the needs that they have from all of their different perspectives, as well as where they see Metro playing the strongest role in helping to promote the housing production and choice. We did a lot of coordination with our jurisdictional partners through this group called the Implementers Work Group, where we had a member of planning and housing staff from all of the cities in the metro region that are required to produce a housing production strategy, so we could really understand. They're in the weeds, they're really in the day-to-day of thinking about what makes sense for their local communities, and we really wanted to make sure our work was very aligned with the needs that they were having, and that we were doing complementary work to what made sense in the local context. We've also been presenting and getting ideas from our metro committees, as well as other committees like yours. So once we got over 100 ideas for things that Metro could do, we really needed to refine that down to a more manageable list before we could start evaluating and prioritizing the ideas. In many cases, there were quite a few similar ideas, so we would combine those, add more detail where it made sense, or in some cases, remove actions that were maybe beyond Metro's purview or authority to take. And that resulted in a shorter list of 44 actions. And that is the last time we came to you all in July, was to present that list of shortened actions and to give you a preview of kind of where that prioritization was landing. In order to do that prioritization, we developed an evaluation framework that captured 3 different buckets of criteria. Primarily, we started with the operational considerations and impact, so we would understand each action, what it would take for Metro to feasibly commit to taking that action in the next 6 years, what it would mean for staff resources, for feasibility, for funding, as well as the overall impact of the action. Since that is the primary goal of the strategy, we really wanted to start there with our evaluation and prioritization. Then as well, we wanted to capture that not every action has the same impact when it comes to production or when it comes to fair housing. So we wanted to make sure we had criteria that captured both, so that our strategy as a whole was accomplishing production, affordability, and housing choice. All right, so where that landed us was with a shortened list of 16 actions in 6 different categories. And I'll walk through those in a little bit and give you a sense of some of the public comments that we're hearing so far. These actions also came out of, we had check-ins with our Metro Council to hear where they're thinking about their direction for prioritization, especially for funding measures. We really need to follow in their steps for where they are leading the agency. But overall, our intention is to commit to implementing all of these actions that are adopted immediately following the council adoption in December. So starting early next year, we'll be getting underway with this work. Many of these actions will require additional engagement and coordination with our jurisdictional partners, with service providers, with people that were involved with the development of this strategy, to make sure that the implementation is very effective and makes sense and is meeting the needs that we set out to meet. All right, so this first category was accelerate housing production. We heard from our implementers work group, that group of our jurisdictional partners, that this was really key for them, especially from our smaller jurisdictions, to help meet capacity constraints when it comes to housing. Many of our smaller cities, we heard they don't have, dedicated housing staff, dedicated housing departments, but they're still required to do these housing production strategies. So they really saw that Metro could play a critical role in helping to supplement that capacity through funding, technical assistance, or programs that could support housing professionals being available to them. Under the research and assessment category, we heard a lot of support for number 7, innovative approaches. And this one is really, it encompasses a few different things. One of them was the desire to find more approaches for funding affordable housing beyond low-income housing tax credit models. It also encompasses new approaches to construction types, to development types, cross-laminated timber, modular housing. So there is a strong interest in having Metro kind of lead the charge into bringing more innovative approaches to the region when it comes to housing production. For number 8, we heard some feedback about yeah, it's important to understand where middle housing assessment is happening and maybe why it's not in other cities, but also we really want a better understanding of who those units end up serving and are they serving the population that we hoped that they would serve? And if not, why is that happening? Where is that gap coming from? So that is a little bit more feedback that we got for number 8. Under the convene and coordinate category and new tools, we heard a strong feedback about number 9 about the importance of having actions that speak to not just housing production, but affordable housing preservation. So that is a key goal of action number 9 is to focus attention and funding and resources on preserving the affordable housing that we already have in the region, since that is just as critical as continuing to produce more housing. In the new tools category, we had a little bit of some mixed feedback from number 11 and number 13. Those are our 2 actions that are about generating data and dashboards. From our local staff, we heard some concerns about, will this be burdensome? Will this be an extra task on top of what they're already required to do at the state level? Will keeping a tool like this updated be possible so that it is relevant and useful? So that was really important for us to think about as we pursue building out the program or researching what it would take to accomplish those, to make sure that we are not duplicating efforts that are already happening, and how can we be complementary and useful at the end of the day for those. The regional land bank plan was very broadly supported everywhere that we brought this action to, from MPAC, MTAC, our counselors, implementers work group, and through the public comment period. So really exciting to get a lot of unified energy around that one. And our last 2 categories, policy and funding and cross-sector collaboration, 15 and 16 were across the board, along with the land bank, our most supported action items. These speak to the need and the desire to have clear, focused advocacy efforts through our region to bring more funding and resources, a desire to have, kind of similar to what we do for transportation, for housing, bringing together all of our regional voices and speaking with a clear voice. And then number 16 speaks to assessing feasibility for a new Metro affordable housing bond. We've heard from many of our participants how critical those dollars have been to keeping their services and operations up and running, and that that would be very impactful to have another bond in the future. So like I mentioned, today is the last day of our public comment period. We have a survey available on our project website. If you have additional feedback beyond what you may share with us now, feel free to email our project team as well. Following the public comment period, we'll be incorporating that feedback to further refine the draft to be heading into the final version for review and approval. So we have an MTAC meeting also this morning to hear their review. MPAC will be next week. That'll be, again, this discussion over the draft. In November, those groups will vote on making a recommendation, and in December, council will review the final draft and make their approvals. So that is all for my update, and we'll be happy to answer kind of any questions you might have about the project or the next steps. Erin Key is also with me this morning, Urban Policy and Development Manager, to answer any questions you all might have.
Good morning, everyone.
Thanks, Laura. Commissioner Savas.
Yeah, thanks for the presentation. I don't have I'm not challenging anything that you have all come up with thus far, but where has infrastructure been part of the conversation? I would say that 25 years ago, Clackamas County took a very deliberate program, we call it concurrency. And actually this group here, C4 and C4 Metro Subcommittee, are a byproduct of that concurrency, and making sure that we have adequate infrastructure to meet the growth demands for housing. And back 25 years ago, we had a lot of hope and promise that the Sunrise Corridor, Highway 212, Happy Valley and East would be a big part of that. And so when I hear from providers, whether it's inside Metro or outside Metro or along the state, they had master plans system plans that were designed for a particular growth rate. And with the emphasis somewhat artificial in the sense that the governor's housing goals exceed a lot of those areas in which they are supposed to come up with this plan. That wasn't baked into their long-term planning. So, how much of infrastructure was part of that discussion? Things like transit, things like transportation, water, sewer.
Well, a big part of the conversation, particularly with the jurisdictional work group, was about SDCs. I think there was a deep desire for Metro to come in and cover SDCs for developments of housing. And I really love that idea if we had a source of money for that kind of thing. So where we put that energy was into this idea of the joint voice with the legislature, that we work as a region to speak with one voice about what we need and the support that we need to build out our infrastructure. That's really where the focus of the conversation happened in the conversations we had putting this plan together.
Could you elaborate on the SDCs? Where I mean, because there's a huge funding shortfall for someone to increase one increment of, let's say, water or wastewater or reservoirs or things like that that would feed that. So we talk about raising the SDC amount
No,
or or waiving the cost for SDCs because it doesn't really get to the core thing that currently under the design model for funding and long-term planning, the SDCs aren't enough alone.
yeah, no, the idea was that if we could replace SDCs with a different funding source, if we had a SDC waiver and a fund, a regional fund that could cover the costs of infrastructure construction for new housing, that would be great. We all agreed on that. The struggle was where that funding would come from. And so we felt like the best outcome was to put that into an action that had us talking about a coordinated legislative agenda for the region focused on housing. So that's where you'll see it in the plan.
Okay. I see someone else has their hands up, but I'll just pause for now.
Thanks, Commissioner Savis. Councilor Anderson, good morning.
Good morning. Question about item 4 with your accelerating housing production. If you could expand the type of technical assistance that you provide, I think that one thing that would be really helpful, there are a lot of different state programs and incentives that have been passed recently that, while I really appreciate all of them, it can be technical for a small city to try and navigate how to connect with all of them, how to actually get those resources for planning staff that's already burdened with some of the requirements that the state is putting down or some of the other things that are coming up. And I think specifically this Middle Housing Revolving Loan Fund is one that I know Milwaukee is really excited about. I think that it would be a great thing for us to discuss more as C4, and is this something that the county and cities can work on? But even more broadly, I think this is a spot where technical assistance from Metro for cities within the Metro region to be able to access these funds and leverage them. Like I think our staff just could use support in understanding how to connect with all of these different programs outside of just a housing professional pool who can do technical assistance. Navigating these programs is helpful as well.
Great, thank you for that feedback.
Thank you, Councilor Anderson. I was kind of curious, like the interface between, Metro staff and, folks down at the state. I mean, like one practical thing we're facing, Metro has been great at giving out grants to help planning efforts, and we have a Metro grant that's funding some work we're doing in LO, kind of creating our next, new neighborhood, which is intended to deliver a lot of housing units. But it's going to be kind of a urban renewal area type strategy there. And, the planning effort itself is a couple years long. And, if we could like run our urban renewal plan development concurrently, it would accelerate the process overall because, then that would be like another, but, even in a city our size, with the largest city in the county, we don't have the capacity to do both those plans concurrently, because the planning staff is working on all these code updates, like the never-ending code updates that all of us are working on, right? So, stuff like that, you wonder, well, we talk about like accelerating housing production, but like we could do it, but it's kind of like capacity issue is a real barrier, in the planning departments. And the like maybe the state updates, it's not to say like they're not good updates, but they're kind of running everyone a little ragged. So I'm just wondering like if Metro and the state are coordinated. And I know it comes off as complaining, cities, oh, we don't want to this is distracting us from other work or whatnot. But in a way, sometimes it's distracting us from actually getting housing built right now.
Yeah, we have heard this quite a lot from jurisdictions across the region, and that is the other half of number 4. It is partially jurisdictions who need specialty assistance, technical assistance with housing issues, things like middle housing and how to take advantage of available funding, but it's also just staff capacity to run permits and make code updates. So we want to explore how Metro can make CET funds available for staffing. So that's the other part of number 4.
What do you think is like the timeline for that?
It could be within a year.
No.
We have to do the work to understand that the changes that are required to the program, and we need to talk to our council and get their direction on the details. But if it works out like we think it might, and those funds can be used that way, then it won't take very long.
That's great. Thank you. Commissioner Savas, back to you.
Yeah, thank you. Mayor Bucky brought up a great point. We hear that really a lot around the state. And so not only do I have, really speaking about, the Clackamas County hat or the regional hat, but also at a state level, and I just wonder, number one, what I hear a lot, I don't care where we are, trying to meet these housing goals, is infrastructure. And so, whether it's concurrency or looking at from a planning standpoint, what areas are deficient? What are those deficiencies themselves, right? How do we address that? And knowing that districts, special districts are sometimes a big part of providing that. Let's just say transit, for example. Are we working, are in this work group, how much do districts and infrastructure providers play a role? Are transportation departments part of this conversation?
I'm not sure I understand the question. And in what work group?
Well, you meant in your presentation, you were talking about the provider, or not the providers, but the people that were asked to join. You mentioned that there were jurisdictional partners
okay.
like cities. So in that setting, how much were service providers, infrastructure providers, districts part of that group?
We didn't invite service providers to that group. We do have service because that was a meant to be staff who have worked on or will be working on their own housing production strategies. So that was housing and planning staff from jurisdictions, but we also have utilities and service districts represented on MTAC, who's been involved in the production of the plan and having conversations about it. I don't want to give the impression that infrastructure was not a big part of this conversation. It absolutely was a huge conversation about barriers. I think our struggle was what Metro can do in that realm without a huge funding source. And so where we landed was again on regional coordination, on understanding where we need to put the resources and advocate for new resources.
Thank you very much. Councilor Lewis, good morning.
Yeah, thank you. I just really want to focus in on the fact that through all of the listening and engagement, there were 100 something recommendations that are now down to 16. And those 16 are not because they're not only some of the most popular, where people have enthusiasm, where very few people have concerns about additional burden, but because these are the right size pieces that Metro could actually do an additive role, or the amount of money is necessary to complete them is something we could potentially find. And I think infrastructure, like it could just be up there as number 1, but what are we going to do for it, right? Like it could be a policy conversation, but there's no funding source for us to have an infrastructure bank right now. We tried advocating alongside cities for that at the state. We got it one time and it was like 1/8 the size it needed to be. So yes, we need to have a legislative strategy. We need to have a bigger conversation. But the council in our discussions has been fairly focused on these recommendations being tight and at the level at which we're either actionable as a convener or actionable as a funder. So I hear you, Commissioner Savas. There are other externalities that are out there, but these are the roles that Metro uniquely can play.
Yeah. Thank you, Councilor Lewis. All right. Laura, thank you for the presentation. Aaron, thank you for being here, answering the questions.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next on the agenda, we have MTAC updates, and Laura Turway is here to talk to us. Good morning, Laura.
Good morning. Laura Turway, City of Happy Valley. So for MTAC, we've been very busy working on a lot of projects that you've seen in other realms. Last month, we met and had an introduction to proposed minor housekeeping amendments on the Metro Code. This month, later today, we're going to vote on a recommendation for those. Last month, we worked on the Comprehensive Climate Action Plan and then also a state review of the metropolitan greenhouse gas reduction targets. Later today, we're going to be touching back on the regional housing coordination strategy as you just discussed, and also hearing about a Happy Valley downtown plan. So exciting stuff at MTAC. Happy to answer any questions.
Thanks, Laura. Questions? Okay. Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate the update. Okay, folks, moving right along. Next on the agenda, we're gonna have a presentation on the cooling corridors. We're kind of switching over to the JPAC side of things. JPAC is meeting tomorrow. We're going to also be talking about this cooling corridors at the JPAC meeting. This update with recommendations and such. We're also going to be talking about the regional emergency transportation routes. This is like phase 2 project update. And then TriMet is going to be presenting on their how they're going to be evaluating planned service cuts given the increased costs and decreased revenue that they are facing. So that's what's going on. And cooling corridors. Now, who is here talking about cooling? Andre. It's Andre. Andre, good morning. How are you doing?
I'm great. How are you?
Good. Thanks for being here this morning.
Of course. Let me pull up my screen. Give me 1 second. Okay. Can you see that? Or is that like, it looks a little small. Give me 1 sec. I'm on a single monitor, and so it's not my usual setup. Give me 1 second, please.
If it's okay, while Andre's getting set, Andre and Joe and Kim are all here. We have a fantastic team at Metro who have been working on this cooling corridor study, and we all are aware of how in the summers our heat challenges have affected people at a very personal level, from death to needing to open cooling centers to all of the emergency responses. But our communities can get really, really hot. And this is some really interesting and compelling data. We're excited to have involved a lot of partners, including community, but also federal resources. And I really think this is Metro in a really cool space of innovation, having talked to very few other folks in the country who are doing this work. So Andre and Joe are super cutting edge and excited to share this today. Did that buy you enough time to put your screen up?
Yeah, yes, thank you. Let me go ahead and pull that back up. Sorry about the technical difficulties. We may have to just share it in this sort of side view for now because
that's great how it is now.
Okay. Let me just hit present and see if it makes it bigger for you. Does that make it full screen?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Okay, perfect. Great. Well, thanks so much for the introduction. Yes, once again, I'm Andre Lightsey Walker. I'm a senior transportation planner here at Metro. I'm really excited to show you the work we've completed through the cooling corridor study. So wanted to just start with sort of the desired outcomes. And we went into this project wanting to reduce the number of annual heat-related deaths down to 0 in the Portland metro region, because we don't think a hot day is a reasonable excuse for people dying in our communities. We also recognize that death isn't the only thing that happens. People get sick, and sometimes they don't actually even recognize that the illness is due to heat. And so we want to make sure that we're bringing down the number of heat-related illnesses in the region as well. Where possible within the public right-of-way, we want to focus on areas that are disproportionately hot and bringing down temperature. And last but certainly not least, we want to increase the amount of cooling resources available and enhance accessibility throughout the region to communities during extreme heat events. So just to sort of give you a quick little highlight of our discussion today, we're going to start with some background research and engagement. Joe will cover our map-based analysis, and then we'll move into our draft recommendations and hold some space for discussion. So just through this research, we started off with just sort of understanding what's out there, what work has already been done across the nation as well as globally. And that led us to sort of highlighting 8 topic areas where we saw recurring themes of strategies. And so the first was trees. The second is communication and education programs. The third is community resilience and adaptation. The fourth is natural elements, and that includes water and wind. The fifth is parks and open spaces. Sixth, which is pretty emergent, is pavements, as well as roofs and buildings and streetscape design. And so we went through a very robust engagement process. We engaged over 135 people, and we really went in and got on the ground. We talked to people experiencing houselessness. We partnered with Street Roots. We partnered with community-based organizations and held some focus groups. We convened our local and regional partners on a regular basis. We also brought in some national and international experts, which were chief heat and climate officers, to hold sort of a large working session. And then we worked with our regional and technical policy committee, and also partnered with Metro staff in other departments as well. So yeah, we hosted 2 disaster preparedness and community resilience workshops, 3 community conversations. We participated in the 82nd Avenue cooling workshop with the EPA. We hosted the expert panel that I mentioned with the chief heat officers. We convened 6 regional work group meetings, 10 Metro advisory group meetings, 8 regional policy and technical advisory committee meetings, and 11 small group conversations with various Metro staff members. And some key takeaways from that: local agencies and community-based agencies and community-based organizations are already doing really amazing work. And we want to better understand our way as Metro to support that work rather than recreating the wheel. We also learned and recognized that we're in a very unique time for environmental funding. Partners need more funding that is less restrictive and allows them to sort of really dive into the work they're doing. But guidance is supportive, and we want to continue to increase opportunities for coordination and collaboration. We also learned that extreme heat must be prioritized along with other environmental concerns. Our most vulnerable communities do not feel as prepared for heat waves as they are for other events like extreme winter, recognizing that heat is sort of an emerging concern. I grew up in the Portland metro region and definitely wasn't worried about super hot days as a youth, but now every summer it's sort of top of mind. And last but not least, vulnerable community members need better access to cool spaces, free drinking water, and timely and clear warning of heat risks and various resources that are out there. Oh, this light just went off. Give me 1 sec. Sorry about that. Oh, there we go. Oh, it's automated. Great. Okay. And so I'm going to pass it over to Joe for our map-based analysis.
Thanks, Andre. Joe Gordon, Principal GIS Specialist at Metro, and working on a lot of the data and map stuff. So we approached the analysis from 3 different geographic scales. So we zoomed in, looked at the pedestrian scale, zoomed out a little bit, looked at neighborhoods, and then zoomed out further and looked at the region. At the pedestrian scale, we were looking specifically for sort of 3 subcomponents along transportation routes. One, the streets that had the most population and employment. 2, the streets that had the least canopy and highest air and surface temperatures. And 3, streets that were in the most vulnerable neighborhoods. Neighborhood scale analysis, the goal of this was to identify first large contiguous natural areas that we identified as cooling corridors, and then to flip that around and identify the areas in the region that don't have access to that, or are sort of the gaps between these existing large contiguous areas. And then the regional scale analysis was looking at natural cooling capacity in the region based on sort of the long-standing things such as elevation, which direction topography is facing, how much solar input there is, wind speed, that kind of stuff. Next slide. So this is the pedestrian scale analysis. This is looking at all the streets in the region, and we see highlighted in red the areas that have the greatest need for cooling strategies along these streets. And so we see some areas getting highlighted in East Multnomah County, in East Portland and Gresham, and out into Wood Village and Fairview and Troutdale. We also see sort of a band through Milwaukee, down towards Gladstone into Oregon City, as well as some unincorporated area kind of along 82nd Avenue and sort of north of Johnson City and west of Happy Valley. And then in Washington County, kind of a band from Forest Grove through Cornelius and Hillsborough and Beaverton, and then dipping south toward Tigard, King City, Tualatin. And again, just a reminder here that these are the streets that are prioritized. They have the most population and most jobs, least canopy and highest air and surface temperatures, and are in the most vulnerable neighborhoods. So that's what we're kind of looking at here. So that's the pedestrian scale analysis, trying to improve that effect. Next slide. Zooming out to the neighborhood, these are the gaps right here that don't have access to large, natural, contiguous, natural space. And so that can include parks, that can include water, that can include really big street trees. You know, like if street trees get big enough, they become their own contiguous natural space and completely shade neighborhoods as a whole. And so it's just looking all together at sort of the natural cooling benefit that these natural elements can provide. And this is the inverse of that, looking at the gaps between that. And altogether throughout the region, there's about 17% of the region that is in a cooling corridor gap, about 8% within the UGB in Clackamas County, about 25% in Multnomah County, and about 10% inside the UGB in Washington County. Next slide. So that's a lot of gaps there, over 100. How do we prioritize those? We bring that pedestrian scale analysis, that sort of overall index that's based on those 3 subcomponents, back in to help weight these gaps. And so we take the average score of all those street indices scores and create sort of a ranking of all these gaps. And so we see that, you know, a lot of high ranking gaps show up in Multnomah County, but there's also clusters of high ranking gaps showing up in Washington and Clackamas County as well. The last piece there on the bottom right is taking sort of the majority land use type that's showing up along these streets and sort of categorizing the streets according to that. So if there was more than 50% of the streets inside of one of these gaps that was industrial, it got categorized as industrial. If there was more than 50% single family residential, it would get categorized as such. And then the last one is sort of a bucket of mixed use residential, multifamily residential, and commercial kind of all put into one bucket as sort of emblematic of a certain type of sort of neighborhood. A little bit of a mix there. If there wasn't a 50%, it ends up being kind of that darker gray color, which is just like there isn't a clear-cut pattern in terms of land use. But the goal of this was that you're going to have different types of strategies that work better in industrial areas different types of strategies, perhaps that work better in single-family residential neighborhoods, different types of strategies in commercial and mixed-use neighborhoods. So that's kind of the tool set that we're trying to build there with the data. And this data will be available for locals to use and try to help prioritize their own investments in cooling strategies. I think that might be my last slide there.
Awesome. Thanks, Joe. So yeah, now I'm going to move us into recommendations and supporting actions. So just to give you sort of a high level, we organize our thoughts sort of into 3 tiers. So we have these 3 overarching categories, and then we have our 9 recommendations, and then we have 48 supporting actions that feed into those recommendations. And so it really provides people that weren't involved in this project sort of different levels of access to our work. So the overarching categories are to raise awareness and increase preparedness, to strengthen coordinated action and response, and to expand cooling strategies. So we'll start with our first recommendation, and that is to elevate extreme heat as an issue of regional concern and strengthen region-wide climate and disaster resilience. So we went into this project recognizing that, heat was the center, but really through our conversations, what it highlighted is that, that's one part of the year and one sort of disaster that we have to think about, but we have to be cognizant that our region actually faces a whole range of potential disasters, including, snow and ice storms back in 2020, where we had the most toxic air on Earth. And then here on the right is when the Willamette River flooded in 1996. And so just recognizing that, yes, heat is important, but general climate resilience is going to be critical for our success as a region. Recommendation number 2 is to apply a heat resilience lens to planning, policy, and project decisions using research and best practices. So I am part of the regional transportation planning team, and every 5 years we generate the regional transportation plan. And so that's one area we think that we can start to integrate the research from this project into our work that's already existing. And then also we want to recognize our role as a public agency that owns property and has opportunities to integrate our findings and different strategies into the actual built environment. So the photo on the right is of the Metro Regional Center, and recognizing that there are great opportunities for us to take what we found and apply it in places that we exist, and sort of set an example for our partners as well as community members. Recommendation number 3 is to raise public awareness of extreme heat events and associated health risks, as well as connect public agencies, community groups, and community members with practical resources to help prepare for and survive these events. So the image on the left is actually a shot from my phone. It's at my local 6 bus stop. And during our conversation with some unhoused community members, one thing that came up was that a lot of folks don't actually even have telephones with data or telephones at all. And I think what it helped us realize is that we really, in the age of technology, we take information and access for granted. Like, we know when it's going to be hot. We get heat warnings on our phone. And it's really important to recognize that there are community members across our region that actually don't even know when a heat wave is coming. And so we have existing sort of connected things out in the world, like these TriMet stops. And how cool would it be, and how simple in theory would it be to just add sort of a forecast for the day or the week to something like this? It's already quite digitized. And then we wanted to shout out one of our partners, Washington County, for this amazing sort of website that provides an opportunity for people that do have internet to go and find a cooling center in any of our counties, and other ways to stay cool on hot days. And so just making sure that we recognize the importance of information in this challenge. Recommendation number 4 is to support and coordinate community-led efforts and government actions to build heat and climate resilience across the region. And this really ties back into this idea of that there's really great work already taking place. And it's really important to recognize our role as a government agency to not recreate the wheel and, tap in and support at levels that are already finding success. So on the left, we have Friends of Trees, who's an organization that, you know, plants trees across the region. And then on the right is actually, this is particularly exciting. It was with DPAVE, which is an organization that goes and, you know, green spaces, tears up the cement and pavement and, you know, converts it into gardens and spaces like that. And so we had a conversation. They were one of our community partners that we engaged with. We actually got invited to this ribbon cutting of a church that originally had a completely paved parking lot that they broke down and converted into a children's playground, like picnic space, and a community garden as well. And so it's really, really cool to be there for that, and just to see the work is already happening. Recommendation number 5 is to support and expand emergency response actions by public agencies, special districts, utilities, and other workplaces. So want to give a shout out to the good folks at Hillsborough that have the hometown tap, which is like a portable drinking water filling station that was brought to the farmers market in this situation. Just a really, really cool model of how to meet people where they are and provide a cooling resource. And this is on the right is Universal Plaza in Tigard. And just wanted to sort of highlight how transformational just, you know, turning on a water feature can be on a really, really hot day. Recommendation number 6 is to improve access to home weatherization and indoor cooling, especially for vulnerable populations. And this is just a shot of a home install, part of the Portland Clean Energy Fund Cooling Portland program, which has installed, I want to say, over 16,000 cooling units. And I, once again, you know, in the past, AC wasn't really necessary in homes across the Portland metro region, and we're seeing that it's becoming very, very serious and necessary now. And so just recognize that there's programs like this that exist. That one is very geographically specific. And so what would it look like for Metro and our partners to expand these resources across the region? Recommendation number 7 is to promote investment in green infrastructure, energy efficient cooling, and climate resilient streetscapes and public and private places. So the image on the left is a bus stop in Pakistan that has these really cool like misting fans. Just to, you know, and I think what's really nice is supporting people and community members that are choosing to take an alternative transportation mode. So very, very supportive of that. And then the image on the right, Tommy Albo's a member of our Parks and Nature department and took the shot of a shade structure when he was out in New York City. And so just starting to give us ideas of ways to keep people cool out in the environment. Recommendation number 8 is to support coordinated regional efforts to plant, protect, and maintain trees long-term. We have some really amazing tree data out there. And so thinking about how can we use this information to make sure that we're planting trees and planting species of trees that will live into the future and, you know, really provide a type of cooling that has been practiced since the beginning of time. You know, people have been hiding in the shade forever. And so just being very strategic about keeping our region cool through tree planting and maintenance. And then recommendation number 9 is to preserve and enhance access to parks and open spaces as cooling refuges. I think one thing is when we think about sort of parks and open spaces, we always think green, but I think it's also important to think blue as well. And so this is an image of the big float that doesn't take place anymore, but it was like a really amazing event where we got a bunch of folks into the Willamette River. And actually, when I was at the Street Trust, we led a bike ride from the Lentz neighborhood all the way to the big float and then had everybody jump in. And so just recognizing that, you know, we have natural cooling resources. And so what does it look like to tap in and make those spaces accessible and safe for people? So those were the 9 recommendations. And then, as I mentioned before, there are what we got down to a total of 48 actions that feed up into those recommendations. Originally, we had 170, and so we went through a pretty robust process of, consolidating and then really thinking through of which actions made more sense. And so we wanted to share the 5 actions that we elevated to Metro Council, because we think that Metro is well suited based on our sort of positionality within the region and as a convener. And they also amplify the momentum and support regional partners that are already doing great work. And we also recognize that we need to continue to build political and public support for heat adaptation. And so we'll move through those 5 actions and then open it up for discussion. So the first is to declare extreme heat as an issue of regional concern and designate a region-wide heat season. This is already taking place at some of the county levels as well as across the nation. There are many places that say, hey, from this date to this date is when we are going to be all hands on deck, all things heat, and sort of building out just sort of a communication pathway to get people in the region thinking about heat in a way that they haven't historically. And so this infographic is from Miami-Dade County. That's just really simple, but as an opportunity, if you've never thought about extreme heat as a risk, it's a great sort of entry point. The second is to support a regional climate action resource navigator to coordinate with partners so that we can track the availability of federal, state, and private funding programs that can be allocated to cooling strategies and pursue funding opportunities. And so, recognizing that we are in a very unique funding universe, but if we support a resource navigator that could allow us to really dial in and focus on sorry there we go, securing funding in other places. The third is to establish a chief climate officer at Metro to represent the agency and facilitate internal coordination. I'm not sure about all of your agencies, but I recognize that in government agencies, there can be siloing. And so recognizing that if we have a chief climate officer, we could better coordinate our climate efforts throughout the agency. And during our expert panel, we got to talk to 3 really amazing and inspiring climate officers that really helped shape this idea. 4 is to establish a centralized hub for heat and climate data, recognizing that Metro already is a major hoster of data. And throughout this project, we, gathered a bunch of new layers as well. And so I think data is really made useful when it's accessible. And so we want to make sure that we're sharing this heat data and providing a hub for our partners to tap in and use this data to influence their projects and decision-making processes. And 5th is to develop a regional heat relief network, which is focused on tracking and updating existing cooling resources across the region. Our partners at Maricopa Association of Governments inspire this idea, and really it's just a map of all the range of resources distributed across the region. And the theory is that someone could, hop on our website and find, type in their address and then see all the cooling resources or climate resources proximate to their address and be able to access them and hopefully, on a really hot day, potentially save their life. So wanted to move into discussion. We've got 3 questions for you all to consider. Do you have any feedback about the 9 recommendations and our actions identified for Metro and our partners? Do you want to provide any feedback about, the 5 actions that we're considering implementing over the next year, which I just highlighted? And then do you want to provide any feedback about potential opportunities to integrate the cooling corridor study and recommendations into the future vision update, regional transportation plan, and any other Metro-led climate resilience efforts? And thanks so much for your time.
Thank you, Andre. Great presentation. Mayor Milch, please go ahead.
I appreciate that you've connected with other counties and cities across the country and learned from them. That's really a good strategy. I noticed some of the areas on your maps that were in bright red were street corridors like McLaughlin 99E that runs through, as you say, Milwaukee down through Gladstone, Oregon City. Just coincidentally, we were doing some code updates in our city to some of our development codes, and they made reference to trees and rules about trees. And there was an exception carved out for McLaughlin Boulevard that runs through our city because ODOT doesn't like street trees in their right of way. And I think I think it's a maintenance issue partly. You know, when you have trees, you have branches, you have leaves, all that stuff. I love driving up to Portland from Gladstone and going through that stretch by Westmoreland Park in the south part of Multnomah County, where you have huge old trees on both sides of the road. It's the most pleasant part of that drive, but I know that sometimes branches fall and create hazards there too. But I just wonder if there could be some strategizing with ODOT and recognition that maybe some of the reasons for certain policies need to change as climate changes, and that trees along ODOT corridors might be more important now, and they might have to reconsider some of their policies.
Yeah, thank you for that. I think absolutely we need to be considering policies for the future, right? As well. And so, yeah, I think maintenance of trees continued to emerge as a concern. And it's like, yes, trees need maintenance. And what does it look like to answer that question? And when you're building out a tree planting program, making sure that you're building out a tree maintenance program in partnership with that as well.
Yeah. Thank you. Commissioner Savas.
Yeah, hey, thanks for really appreciate this presentation. And, there's a number of things that resonate with me pretty significantly. But do you have a map of maybe the region in which actual people have actually had severe illness or death as a result of heat? Like where are the problems on a geographic scale or map? That's my first question. I have another one.
We will soon. We're working with the counties to get that data. It's there's a tri-county effort through the public health departments to put out zip code level data regarding heat related illnesses, and so it should be out soon, and we're going to incorporate, at least visualize that data. It's a little late, I think, at this point to sort of bring it into the analysis in sort of a proper form, but to be able to compare it visually to sort of the distribution of these other patterns that we're seeing as well. Yeah.
All right. The reason I ask is, in my 28 years of being deeply involved in the community I live in, which is the Oak Grove, Jennings Lodge area, ran a business and so forth, and been in my elected capacities for 25 years. This area has been very conscious and proud of their tree canopy. And areas like Lake Oswego have a great tree canopy in many of the neighborhoods. So the suburban areas offer a lot of refuge for people that are out on the street. And now with the growing houseless population, which is unfortunate, they may not have opportunities for refuge, and maybe they are on the streets and so forth. So to me, I think that number one, the reason for the ask of the map of where maybe some of these heat deaths are or illnesses is I think is important, because I think they're the most vulnerable and the most immediate need that we have. So therefore, to not evaluate that and prioritize areas where we're actually seeing those kind of impacts, I think we need to lift that. And I do know, oddly enough, in areas in Clackamas County where we know people are, whether they are dehydrated, they don't have access to water, are actually sometimes in areas where there's a pretty deep canopy. They're camping out in way off the beaten path, way off the corridors, and yet they're just literally dehydrated because they don't have access to good water or adequate water. But I do want to say that I think we also need to be responsible government and acknowledge that as I've watched the tree canopy in our area and our advocates, which again, that resonates with me. Development is a big factor in a lot of trees that went down in my neighborhood. I mean, I look at McLaughlin Boulevard. When I first moved here to the Clackamas County in 1984, my gosh, there's a lot of, I mean, there's a hundreds and hundreds of trees have been lost through development. I can name areas like, for example, in developments, I think probably one of the biggest ones, the two biggest ones are some of the housing subdivisions that got in, along with how many trees and canopy went down, bringing the orange line to this neck of the woods, right? There was a wonderful place, frankly, I won't say a refuge, but just a great place that I hung out, which is now, in the Park Avenue area, which is now completely transformed. And certainly we have a lot of challenges in that area. But I think we need to recognize that, when 30 years ago, 40 years ago, when there were no sidewalks on McLaughlin, in order to put those sidewalks down, which I'm a big advocate for sidewalks, we had to take out a lot of trees. So I think we need to recognize that developing our corridors a little bit smarter, or developing that, is that creating these big, huge hardscapes. And TriMet does not like, and we were trying to save those trees, frankly, on in that area when the orange line was coming our way. TriMet doesn't like trees. Also, it's not just ODOT. So I think we need to be cognizant and take some responsibility for that. But I would really think right now, for the most immediate need, we have a map of where these illnesses and deaths are due to heat. And I do want to say that having air conditioning for senior citizens, maybe who are barely hanging on to their homes, I know that's a big one for me as well, because we have the highest growing demographic falling into homelessness right now, our seniors. So that's top of mind in my capacity. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Savas. Councillor Callahan, good morning.
Thank you, Mayor Buck. Andre, I just wanted to, I guess, ask with regard to recommendation number 6 about improving the access to the home weatherization and indoor cooling, especially with the vulnerable population, just like Commissioner Savas was talking about, that elderly population, the houseless population, the folks that are, I guess my thought is how much effort do you know is being given to maybe partner with some of those agencies and services that touch those people regularly, like Meals on Wheels and like medical transportation companies, because I think my view of this is, these really big heat waves that come through are generally for a short period of time. And if the primary goal is to, get a zero death sum and really decrease the amount of people that are, suffering injury, we got to really focus, like you said, I think in this presentation, about notification. Hey, it's going to be hot, during this really short period. And 2, getting access and touching those people who are the most vulnerable and who, are not going to be out and about, to ensure that they're doing okay. So I'm just kind of wondering, with regard to that recommendation, is there partnering going on with some of those services and agencies in the communities?
Yes. So I know that the city of Portland definitely partners to help distribute and access, but I think it's something we need to continue to think about. One conversation we had was with older adults living on fixed income through the Northwest Pilot Project. And some of the things we heard, they were just completely jarring. The difference it would make if people are just checking on their neighbors, right? There's sort of this, we live in a very disconnected era through technology. It has also disconnected us. And so, there were stories about people dying and no one even checking on them for a week and recognizing that they were, had passed away. And so what does it look like to support a network of community in these places? And then also something we learned was that even once air conditioning units are installed, people with fixed incomes actually have fears about the utility cost, right? And so it's how do we tackle the whole problem? I think, and it's working with. We have to partner. We are not the experts in fixed income older adult living situations. And so we got to make sure that we're partnering with the folks that are already doing the work on the ground and just sort of bolstering the work that they're doing.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Callahan. With the Metro housing bond, the projects that were built, were they required to put air conditioning in those units? Oh, they were. I don't know about that. Councilor Lewis.
So with the initial bond guidelines, no. At the point at which the council saw that there was the unexpected revenues because of the very good and strategic bond sales, one of the places for using those additional dollars was to add air conditioning to those units. So maybe not central air, but window unit type amenities.
Gotcha. Okay. I was I had a question about on the map, and you don't have to bring it up, but there was 3 industrial when you had the map, it was kind of labeling the priorities areas. It had the priority areas and it had some of the zoning. And there was in the kind of north and northeast Portland area there were 3 kind of large industrial areas that but they were all labeled as high priority. Why would those industrial areas be at the top of the list?
Yeah, so that was just based on that pedestrian index being all the streets that intersect those gaps, that index being averaged and the score being high in those areas. And it's high in those areas because there's lots of jobs, not as many residences, but lots of jobs. There's not as much tree canopy, high surface and air temperatures. And then the last piece is that the heat vulnerable communities is based on tract level census or American Community Survey data information. And when you get into those large northern industrial tracts, they get pretty large, but they do intersect a buffer area of a little bit of residential populations that are living adjacent to those industrial areas. And those smaller residential areas that are inside those largely industrial tracts tend to be more vulnerable communities that are living there. And so that pushed it higher as well. And so it's really the combination of lots of jobs, no canopy, high temperatures, and the folks that do live around those areas being in vulnerable communities. Yeah. But I think being able to filter it by the land use type can help maybe put it into perspective a little bit. But I mean, each one of those gaps is going to be an idiosyncratic case by case analysis that needs to occur. Like one of them was the airport, right? Like that's going to be its own unicorn case of trying to figure out what you do there, so.
Yeah, that's a big one. Well, as we do focus on the trees here in Lake Oswego, and we're obviously not a disadvantaged area, and we see how these maps line up, right, with the tree canopy and areas of advantage and disadvantage. But what we are constantly like studying the trees, and lots of community efforts around trees. And so, but the vast majority of the trees, right, are on private property. And there's some work we can do, like with our parks, natural areas, like those trees. And then, there's right-of-way trees and such, but even those are the responsibility of abutting property owners. And so that is kind of a challenge, that when we think of like region-wide tree canopy, I mean, the vast majority of it is private property tree canopy. I mean, and this isn't a reg on Clackamas County or anything. I don't know what the other counties, but Clackamas County doesn't have a tree code, no tree code. So we have neighbors, who live in our urban services boundary. They can just clear cut their lots if they want to. And so I don't know how much of this study kind of worked to line up with looking at local ordinances and tree codes. I mean, think like Commissioner Savis made a great point about redevelopment. And redevelopment can lose trees. I mean, I'll like talk about Lake Oswego because it's the community I know. We have been completely, when this community was formed, it was clear cut. They used the logs for the industry. They were doing that iron, work, and they took all the trees out. There was like 0% tree canopy. And now we have the highest tree canopy in the whole region, but that came through local land use codes. And the whole neighborhoods have been redeveloped. But it's all added canopy because of the stringent tree codes. And so I'm just curious how this kind of lines up with these local codes, knowing that the vast majority of the canopy is going to be on private property, and that's going to have to kind of come through land use. Other, incentives and education as well are great. But one of the risks we face is, again, I don't rag it on the state, but their housing agenda, the local tree codes have been at risk. These local sessions, because it's seen as a tension. Tree codes standing in the way of housing development, and they've talked about just doing the state preempting local tree codes. So I think that's, I don't think it has to be either or, and certainly people do weaponize the trees against housing. We know that happens. We see it happen, but it's a shouldn't be an either or, but it is a risk out there. Commissioner Savis, Commissioner Helm.
Yeah, just one small clarification. Clackamas County Urban does have actually a tree code. We don't necessarily have a tree ordinance as much as we have a tree code. So if you have a development or a property and you cut all your trees down and you want to develop on that property, not only are you penalized, but you're not allowed to build for 5 years on that property. So that's as far as we got with it. And granted, we had a lot of input. I lived through that, so I can have a lot of opinions and observations about how all that went down. But it's not this is not an area where you're free to cut without any consequence. I do want to say, just going back to the map, I think what stuck out to me with the brightest red area, this is something that I've again dealt with and tried to talk to for years. So that brightest red area was downtown Portland, back to hardscapes, high density. And as I said to folks, look out the window. If you're in downtown Portland, look out the window. Show me your tree canopy. There isn't much, and you could tree line all the streets, and you probably will not have a large effect. And in knowing that downtown areas across the country are some of the hottest areas because they are heat sinks, right? They absorb that heat, they stay hot, and there is no really refuge unless you want to get out of Dodge. So, with that said, what's the remedies that you all see for areas like downtown Portland, as an example, where high density hardscapes, there is not much place for trees? What is the remedy?
Great question. I think it's a collection of remedies, right? I think making sure that there's places for people to stay cool indoors that are publicly accessible, as well as recognizing the giant cooling mechanism that's running right down the center of the city, which is the Willamette River. And so what does it look like to make that more accessible? So, we think trees and shade, but water is a great cooling resource. Parks with water features, publicly accessible, clean, free drinking water. Just recognizing just the full range of cooling mechanisms that are possible, and then implementing them where you can and where they fit.
Yeah, thank you, Andre, for that. And I think for where I live, increasing the number of parks, accessible parks in our area, we're very park deficient. In my neck of the woods, slowly making advances, but I couldn't agree more. Unfortunately, we also have the Willamette River nearby as well. So
yeah. Thank you, Commissioner Helm.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention, Mayor Buck, because you were talking about Lake Oswego's tree canopy back when Damascus, we were working back when the city was a city, and we were working on all of this with our lovely blank canvas. It took us 3 years to pass a tree ordinance. It was one of the most contentious, I think even more so than maybe gun rights in Clackamas County. We had full chambers of people you can't tell me we can't cut down our trees. And we were saying, it's not for now, it's for future development, because we use the city of Lake Oswego as an example of how it increases your value of your property when you have more trees. We also use the city of Happy Valley as an example of they cut down all of their trees and now they have to start with these little small trees, and it's going to take years and years and years to get a tree canopy. So it's worth visiting for, I'd say, future developments and trying to institute something. because trying to explain to people that we're not telling them what they can and can't do right at the moment, it's for future development. It was for a very testy subject for sure. But yeah, and one of my disappointments, I was on a tour of our new courthouse the other day, is that we didn't take the opportunity for a green roof, on that building, brand new building, and there's a huge open space of just nothing. There could have been a green roof. So there's other ways to mitigate the heat. So, and it doesn't always have to be trees. It can also be grass and low-lying shrubs, I think, as well. So
That's so true. Yeah, thank you, Commissioner Helm. I'll say like our most contentious issues here are definitely around trees. Long shot.
And pickleball.
Well,
and pickleball.
That's why we're back in your bond, Josh. You're gonna send them all your way. All right, thank you very much, Andre, Joe, for the presentation. Kim, thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. We'll see you all tomorrow. Okay. TPAC updates, Mr. Farley and Karen. Good
Yes,
morning.
I'll just jump in quickly. I know it says Jeff on the agenda, but Jeff has a conflict this morning, so I'm here to support Will, but I'll pass it over to Will to provide the TPAC updates.
Good morning, mayors, councilors, and commissioners. I'm Will Farley with the City of Lake Oswego, but I represent the cities of Clackamas County on the Transportation Policy Alternatives Committee. We had a somewhat light agenda on the last meeting back on, I think, October 3rd. We had our general updates, including a fatal crash update that identified 3 fatal crashes that occurred in Clackamas County during the month of September. We had the same excellent presentation from Andre about the Metro Cooling Corridor study that identified areas of risk in Clackamas County, including clusters in Milwaukee, Gladstone, Oregon City, and unincorporated areas between Happy Valley and Johnson City, as you saw in his slides. Metro will plan to bring back the work as part of the 2028 RTP update. We also had an update on the Regional Emergency Transportation Route Phase 2, which is building on previous work to develop a tiering framework to help prioritize which routes within the Portland-Vancouver region should be cleared and reopened following a catastrophic emergency. We'll have further discussion at TPAC and technical workshops to give further input in this upcoming few months. The final recommendations of that phase will be incorporated in the next RTP update as well. And then our meeting ended on some news that TriMet is going through some service cuts due to inadequate funding. They're currently working on which cuts in service to make and are taking input from the public through survey. The cuts in November were highlighted. They'll focus on reducing service frequency during the late hours or off hours of transit. One such proposal that was identified was reducing the frequency of line 35 through Lake Oswego, West Linn, Clackamas County to hourly after 9 p.m. The survey inputs will feed into their next round of cuts that are looking to be identified around January of 2026. And that was it for our meeting. Karen, do you know if I missed anything or Jeff have any other notes?
No, it sounds like you covered it all.
Thank you, Will. Thank you, Karen. You have questions, TPAC? No? Okay. Okay, that's the end of the agenda. Anyone have anything else? No? Oh, Jamie.
If I can real quick, given that Jeff couldn't make it today, at our last C4 meeting, the body received an update on the Regional Emergency Transportation Routes project. Metro is holding their final workshop on this item in mid-November, and it sounds like all jurisdictional staff are welcome to attend. It may be something worth keeping an eye on if your jurisdictions are interested in commenting on that map, which designates routes in your community for inspection after a major emergency.
Okay. Thank you, Jamie. Okay. Commissioner Savas, anything else?
Well, there's always lots to talk about, but it's always nice to end a meeting on time or early. So let's take advantage of that.
Okay. Well, with that, then we are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.